Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video for the channel. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another great albums episode, which is a series where I recommend you 4 albums that I love. Usually we have a theme here, and this time the theme is 70s, albums from the 70s. You know that was a great decade for music. A lot of wonderful genres came to play. For example, the post-punk, punk, rock was amazing in the 70s as well, disco music, folk music, there was just a bunch of shit. It's just a decade that I really enjoy in terms of music. I obviously was not alive. Usually no one watches his fucking videos, no one really watches me anyway, but for every album review, versus video or ranked video that I upload, I get like 100, 600 views or something, and sometimes even 800. But instead these videos are watched by like 7 people. But you know what? If one of those 7 people enjoyed my take on these albums, or didn't know these albums and decides to go and listen to it and actually fucking loves it, that's enough for me, okay? So if you actually didn't know anything about these albums and enjoyed the album after I, introduce you to the album, leave it on the comments. Come on, be a friend. With that being said, let's just go on with the video. Let's go. The first album we're talking about here is Let It Be by the Beatles, and the reason why I chose Let It Be is because I think this is the most relaxed album that the Beatles ever put out, even more than, the first album they ever released. Every other Beatle album has something groundbreaking or an amazing story behind it in terms of music. For example, the first Beatles albums, it was basically the Beatlemania around them, the fact that they introduced the British music to basically the rest of the fucking world. Then you have the 1965 to 1969, where in every album they were doing an innovative, groundbreaking release, and it was awesome. Even 2 per year in the case of 1965. Instead, this album is just basically the Beatles going back to the basics. There's nothing that groundbreaking or that innovative in this album, but it's still a great fucking album. Paul McCartney in this album fucking kills it, not only with ballads like The Long and Winding Road and Let It Be, literally Let It Be is in this album, the title track. He also has some good rock and rollers, for example, Get Back, I've Got a Feeling, it's an amazing song, and that, song with John Lennon, One After 909, which is also a highlight on this album. John Lennon also does a wonderful job in this album with songs like Across the Universe, one of his most beautiful and poetic songs ever. And George Harrison has his participation with songs like I Me Mine, and also For Your Blue is definitely not the best moment in this album, but it's good. It's good. Ringo is not in this album, which is a shame. He had to be in this album. It's the last Beatles album, but anyway, pretty much the songwriting is good. It's not like other Beatles album where the band had a lot of chemistry in terms of songwriting and performing. Here it's more disconnected, but that disconnection allows different things, because the Beatles were not only great as a band, they were great as individuals as well. So that's pretty much the case with albums like the White Album, for example. It's not a group project anymore, or it doesn't feel like it. It almost feels like each artist released an album inside the White Album. The same thing happens here on a minor scale, of course. The songs are incredibly catchy as well, and even though the production isn't the best thing ever either, remember that this album was recorded and not only recorded, written and recorded in about a week or 2. I don't really remember the whole story behind it. Go and watch the documentary. But pretty much there's not a bad song on this album. The album has a really short runtime. It's just a nice listen. And the album overall has this feeling of the band's last push, let's say. We know that the last album recorded was Abbey Road, but still, this feels like their last album. This feels like the band not doing it anymore for the band, doing it for themselves. You do have songs in here that kind of bring the band together, like again, I Me Mine, but even that song, the lyrical concept of it was about the egos of all the members of the band. And then you have Two of Us with John Lennon and Paul McCartney doing, the first actual harmony between themselves since 1967. A really good track list here, so definitely check it out if you haven't. This album, it can be quite overrated. A lot of people say that it's at the same level of the band's best material. I don't really think so, but it's still a wonderful album. So yeah, even if this was their last project, the last thing they release, I'm totally fine with it, because this is a great album. We changed the subject here, but I'm still talking about a Beatle, because now we're talking about John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band, released in 1970, the same year as Let It Be. I just thought it would be, slightly poetic to put this album right after Let It Be, because this is also an amazing album, and it showed the reason why that album, Let It Be, felt so disjointed. In this album, right after the recordings of Abbey Road, if I'm not wrong, John Lennon began to write this, and the result was such a personal and private album that you couldn't really put it as a Beatles album. John Lennon could have never released this thing if the Beatles wouldn't have broken up, and that's the reason why I'm kind of glad that they broke up, because this has to be one of my favorite albums ever, bro. The amount of struggle against inner demons and feelings of abandonment from John's mother, feeling of pressure from his fans, and the fact that everyone expected him to believe certain things that he didn't believe in, like he says in the track God, which is a highlight on this album. Also the scream therapy in songs like Well 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 and the track Mother. The minimalistic but also really well accomplished production on this album is great. The drums sound really good. John's voice, even though these echoed vocals can be a little bit annoying, in tracks like Working Class Hero, they remove the echo, the reverb from John's voice, and it sounds more personal and better. The same thing with tracks like Love, because this album does not only have John expressing all of his rage and feelings of abandonment. This album also has some beautiful segments, like the tracks Look at Me, Hold On, and the one I mentioned before, Love. This album is one of the most personal, intimate trips I've ever been through in terms of music, and it's definitely an album that you should check out, because many people don't know this, and I know that maybe in America and the UK everyone knows this album, but I live in South America and I can tell you that not many people know this album. They usually know Imagine, and that's it, when this album is even better, way better actually. So definitely do check this out if you haven't, because you're about to listen to one of the most personal and heartbreaking experiences ever. Give it a try. Led Zeppelin IV takes our spot on this list, and the reason why I wanted to give this album a shout out on this video is because I just did, a couple of weeks ago, a Led Zeppelin ranked video where I rank every single Led Zeppelin album, and I put this one at number 1, and here I just want to keep talking about the album. I do know that this album can be slightly, overrated, because it has a lot of overplayed songs like, fucking Stairway to Heaven, a song that everyone knows and everyone likes to praise. And also tracks like Going to California, Black Dog, Rock and Roll, and the thing is, that it's hard not to praise his songs, because that's what this album is. This album is like an all-stars track list. Like, you have everything here. This is the quintessential rock and roll album. The tracks here are so good that the band members didn't even try to join these songs together. This is the most disjointed album in Led Zeppelin's catalog, man. They didn't put any effort into kind of making a cohesive listen, but the thing is that you don't fucking need it. This has to be one of the most disjointed albums I've heard in my entire fucking life, but it doesn't matter, bro. When you make such an amazing track list with such wonderful, legendary, snappy, catchy, well-produced, well-performed, well written, you don't need to put the songs together. You just have to throw the shit in there and let it, let the songs do their job, and that's exactly what this is. You have Black Dog, you have Rock and Roll, you have Going to California, Stairway to Heaven, Misty Mountain Hop, you have Four Sticks, you have When the Levee Breaks, you have The Battle of Evermore. I mean, every single track here is fucking legendary. You don't have this album don't ever miss. The riffs in this thing are amazing. The chemistry of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant in Black Dog is wonderful. Robert Plant's performance in Rock and Roll is amazing. The drums in When the Levee Breaks are wonderful, as well as the bass. A Stairway to Heaven is like a great combination of every single one of the band's qualities. Is it bass with John Paul Jones? Is it drums with John Bonham? Is it the vocals with Robert Plant? Or is it the guitar with Jimmy Page? Everything comes to shine in that track, and Going to California shows that Robert Plant could write some really poetic and beautiful lines without talking about sex. This is an amazing album. It was one of my first introductions to rock music, of the 70s, and I was amazed by it. And still, even though it was one of the first ones I've heard, it has stayed in my top 10, top 20 best rock albums of all time. And, I think it's going to stay there for quite a while, because this is like the rock album. So, you can't get better than this, actually. So go ahead, listen to this album if you haven't. I know a lot of people have. I'm kind of questioning putting it in this video, because technically this is me recommending albums to you. but you probably already know this one. But I have one you don't know, or maybe I'm pretty sure you do know what this album is, but you do not know that this is a fucking album. You think that this is a t-shirt because we're talking about Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division. This was released in 1979. It was close to being an 80s album actually, and the story behind this album has to be one of the most amazing and thought-provoking stories ever in music, because we're talking about a band that in 4 years with 2 albums and 1 EP managed to become one of the most legendary and important and, best music acts in the history of music. In 1980, they released Closer, which is an album that I would argue is even better than this one. Totally different albums, totally different sound. Here we're talking about Unknown Pleasures, and the reason why I have so much praise for this album is because this has to be one of the most heartbreaking, depressing, and fucking despair-filled experiences in any form of art. And I'm not talking about, that depression that your typical TikTok teen has. I'm talking about something that if you're at the edge of suicide, this album could be the difference between actually doing it and not doing it. The album doesn't really have like beautiful moments. Actually, the most enjoyable, I think you could say, or easy on the ears part on this album is the intro track Disorder, with a guitar in the background, and Ian delivering one of his most heartfelt performances in terms of how his voice sounded, because throughout the rest of this album, Ian's voice sounds way lower and powerful and, kind of menacing rather than comforting, which is one of the reasons why this album has the fame of being such a depressing listen, because Ian's performance is so dark, as well as his lyricism on this album is poetic, straight to the point. He doesn't try to go around the edges when it comes to communicating, but instrumentation is a key part, and actually one of the main attractive qualities of the album come in the way of the drums. The drums in this album are great, like for example in the track She's Lost Control, as well as the guitar riff. Usually Joy Division had this sort of formula where they would grab a drum pattern and a guitar riff that could fit in a dance song, like in a dance punk song, for example. But with Ian's performance and the bass line too, the bass in this album kind of give the track the twist that it needs to make the track what it is, how depressing and how fucking desolated it is. You can find every single member of the band shining through in every single track, but you have some better than others. For example, in the track Inside, the bass is amazing. It's definitely a highlight on that song in particular. Then you have the drums shining in tracks like I Remember Nothing, She's Lost Control, and then you have the guitar shining in tracks like Candidate, and also She's Lost Control as well as Shadow Play, for example, a more rock-inspired tune. If I were to make a top 2,000, 3,000 list of all time, let's say, I would put this album very confidently, I can tell you, in the top 10, because this has to be one of the most immersive and amazing experiences. The dark atmosphere, not dark like pretty dark, like, your typical folk album, no, dark. Filled with depression, filled with numbness, with not knowing what to do, along with the lyrics, the poetry on this album, depicting such a darkness inside a human brain, and knowing that Ian Curtis was actually going through that darkness makes the album even more immersive and even more relatable in terms of, when you're not really feeling good with yourself. This album is one of the GOATs, and I do mean it, man. You definitely need to check this album out if you haven't. A lot of people just don't give a shit about this album, man, and I think I couldn't stretch this enough. I know that this is a hard listening. It's not a pleasing album. It's not an album that you can, you can fucking introduce to your friends in an easy way or play while you're in your car. But go ahead, take some headphones or a speaker, lock yourself in your room, turn off the light, and listen to this thing. Give it a time. Give it time to sink its nails into your skin, and it will stay there forever, like a fucking tattoo on your brain. Give this album a try, and that is pretty much it for this fucking video. I really hope that you enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the videos that I upload. I'm trying my best to do more and more videos every week, so go ahead, guys, give me some support. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel, guys. Do check out every single one of the albums I've mentioned in this video, because if I say that they're great, they're probably great, believe me, just trust in me. If you listen to one of these albums and you didn't quite like it, come back to the video and leave a comment down below. Leave me your opinion on the albums that I've mentioned here, so I can check out, different opinions. That's pretty much the reason why I opened this channel, and the reason why I'm uploading videos. No one really sees them. I don't really get that many views, but at least I would like you to put your opinion on the albums I've mentioned down below, because it's pretty much what makes me excited every time that I upload a video. With that being said, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that I can see you guys soon with a new video. But until then, bye.